And what is
I'm
going on,
ready.
everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. We're headed over to the Rockies to chat about the Colorado Rapids, and we are joined by Juan from the Box State Footy podcast. Juan, how you doing, buddy?
Dude, I'm doing super good. This is one of my favorite things to do is just yap about the Rapids. So I'm here to, add some of my color, add some of my insight into the Colorado Rapids for this upcoming season, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, super happy that we were able to make this work. As I was just saying, it's today. These recordings have been a lot to try and meander around. So I'm glad we were able to put it all together and make it work. But one of the things that we love about bringing on different creators and different content people is that most of the time they get to bring in different scarves. So we're gonna go into scarf of the week here, and I want to throw it over to you. What are you rocking today?
So I didn't want to go with a Rapid scarf,
Okay.
because I wanted to just be a bit different. This is the ISC scarf for
Ooh.
Albuquerque. ISC, if you don't know, is the Independent Supporters Council. They had a good time at Albuquerque. This was about 2 years ago now. So this past year they were up in where were they? And I think they're in Minnesota. The year before
Mhm.
that, Montreal, and the year before Montreal was the Albuquerque one, which I was in attendance for. It's one of the best. If you're in the supporters culture, world, it's one of the best conferences to go out there and see other like-minded people kind of growing up the supporters culture here in the United States. So that's my scarf of the week. What do you got?
I love it. Perfect, perfect, perfect. I am rocking an old school Colorado Rapids with the old school color scheme.
I recognize the colors.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. I don't know how long you've been following Colorado for, but I actually coached at Alfred University with a former Colorado player. He didn't play there very long, but his name is Ray Martinez. He was a striker there in '03. I'm gonna say '03, way, way back. He only played like 7, 8 times, but he doesn't let us forget it. That's for sure.
Hey, that's a good callback, man. I was four around that time, so
Yeah, well, that's what I told
that
him too.
puts
He's
it in
like, were you
perspective.
watching? Were you watching me play? I go, Ray, I wasn't even. I was watching like Teletubbies, dude. Like you're out of your mind if you thought that. But he's a good guy. So when I
Yeah,
found out
man.
he played there, I picked this one up.
That
Yeah,
that color scheme is still a lot of Rapids favorites. So Rapids
yeah,
fans really love that color scheme. They've had some throwback merch about it, and it does well every single time.
yeah, man. Like I said, when they did the old school release of the older scars, so I've got this one, I've got the Clash, I've got the Burn, I've got the 86ers, I've got a whole bunch of them. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna just get as many as I can. They didn't put a MetroStar one out, which is whatever. I'm a Red Bull supporter, so little tight. But that's okay. That's okay. Um,
Isn't that usually MLS's MO though?
yeah, yeah, just a
To
little
forget
bit.
about the Red Bulls.
Yeah, yeah. And we tried our best to make sure they didn't last year, but I'm sure this year we'll get tons of press and tons of coverage for that. I'm sure. Listen, we could talk scarves all day long. We could talk all of that all day long, but I'm sure somebody here who's listening wants to listen to us talk about the 2025 Colorado Rapids. But before we do that, we should chat a little bit about 2024 because Colorado saw a revival of sorts under Chris Armas in 24. A lot of new faces in the door in that preseason, and they were punching high in the West from the start. They did fizzle out a little bit, dropped into seventh place, just above the play-in game, and then were promptly followed by, and I'm sorry, this is a content warning spoiler, an absolute slacking by the LA Galaxy 9-1 on aggregate in the playoffs. So, however, the season was not for naught because they did beat Phillies and PKs to claim the third place spot in League's Cup and a trip to the CONCACAF Champions Cup, as Jordy Mihailovic would say, up the effing PIDs because that was quality. In 2025, they will look to be more competitive in the West as well as find more success in the in-season tournaments they're taking part in, which is the Champions Cup and the League's Cup. What were your thoughts of 24 coming from 23 to 24? The bit of a revival. What were your thoughts overall? Were you happy with it? Did you feel like you needed more?
I'm not even gonna lie, dude. I was quite the resident hater, just mostly because I wasn't really buying the quick turnaround, and thankfully it came. I thought for a lot of the early half of this season, the team was starting to develop and look really well. You also had Moise Bombito, and he was kind of a big proponent of our team style. Bombito would be able to bail out the Rapids out of any, bad individual one-on-one defensive mistakes, Bombi can just clean up, right? He was one of the fastest players in the league, if not the fastest. But I mean, overall, I kind of am not a fan of the Armis ball, even towards the tail end when it was starting to work. We saw it really do really well in the Leagues Cup, and just like Nashville the year before, we kind of had our Leagues Cup hangover those last few games. It also didn't help to have Cole Bassett, who was out throughout those games. Who I think, if anything, what I loved most about the 24 season was Cole Bassett playing from a deeper position, playing from that holding midfield position. I thought he was among the best in MLS at that, in the advanced stats and the G plus and all that. And so, if anything, it really showed us what Bassett's floor could be under Armis. And I think this team just does better if it's built around somebody like Cole at that deep spot, and can only hope that that's the plan moving forward here for 2025.
It's funny listening to another person witness Armis ball. I watched it. I watched him dismantle the greatest Red Bull team ever assembled in 2018 and run it into the absolute ground. So it's fun watching other people do that. But we sat down with Omir Fernandez to start off season 6 for us, and he is very adamant that while Armis's high press system is not going away, it is going to be mixed with a lot more possession based on the ball, which I think should give you a little bit of hope and kind of positive looks out to the 2025 season. Because as a Red Bull supporter, we went from win the ball, dump it, win it high, win the ball, dump it, win it high, win the ball, dump it, win it high, to a bit of a possession based style. We looked good. We added one big player that changed the game, and we made it to MLS Cup final, right? So having just a little bit more possession in that game is going to be big for you guys.
Yeah, I think for me personally, I never really doubted the fight and the grit from the team, which I think Armis does a great job of getting, players out of, and getting that kind of motivation. The Rapids, they conceded a goal, and in years past, they just play flat and get bodied. And there was those games too this season, but, when the Rapids went down, they typically came back. They kept fighting. And so I do like that aspect. The issue for me, of course, lends to the defense. This team had conceded a total of 60 goals throughout the regular season, and then an additional 9 in the playoffs. That's 69 goals, not in the nice way at all. But that's a lot. That's a lot of goals to give up. 69 goals. And, partly, even with Bombito shoring up the back line, it's not enough sometimes to rely on having to outscore the opponent, especially if during possession, the Rapids weren't, they don't have that killer player to just, play through. And right now, it looks to me, the final game of the season, we saw a 3-4-3, kind of the Christmas tree formation. If we see some of that this season, I'm kind of, more optimistic about this year than I was last year, especially since I think that's a better setup for the Rapids and for the Armis system as a whole.
Yeah. And we're going to get into predictions and standings thoughts and all that good stuff. But let's talk a little bit, and there's not a lot to talk about, but let's talk a little bit about players in. Let's talk about these guys who are supposed to come in and change the team. You mentioned a couple of points that you're focused on, and maybe that impacts your decision on best in, but who do you think is the best signing they've made so far here on the 2nd of February, as we are way, way far away from the end of this window?
I wish I could, say it was a big high profile winger that is going to come and shred in, on the right or on the left and be a problem, but we're still waiting on that winger signing or that, next caliber, DP caliber player to step up. But from the ends that we do have, I'm a big fan of Chidozie Awaziam from Cincinnati. Earlier in the offseason, the Rapids made that trade, and I was a big fan of that one, mostly because from seeing Cincinnati, they were kind of rough at the center back position towards the tail end of the season. They didn't really have a core set of guys, but the only person I saw that really stood out from those guys was Awaziam. So I'm a big fan of Owazium. I think he slots right to the top of the depth chart as a center back. Me personally, I know a lot of people are still kind of iffy on that, but for me, that's the guy. I may likely get his jersey if we're being honest, because I'm a big fan of his game. Big
I
fan of
like
his
it.
game.
I like it. Yeah. So, spot on, right? That's exactly what I said. It's been quiet so far, but I do love this move to get him from FCC. He was going to go out, right? You could have let anybody else pick him up. You could have let him leave. But once you moved on from Lalas Abubakar, Maxo needed a partner, somebody that he could play at, who is at the level of an MLS starting center back from day one. And I definitely think they found that in Awaziem. It's a shame. We actually just did our chat with Flying Lion for FCC, and it's a shame he got moved on for a roster constriction, right? He wasn't able to make it out in terms of cutting for salary, and Colorado are going to benefit from that dramatically. So really excited to see how he does that. But you've also got the idea that when you bring players in, you also have to move players on. So biggest loss going into the 2025 season.
Man, let me pull this up because of all the departures, they all seem fairly reasonable. I think if the only guy really that, I kind of don't like to see go is Remy Cabral, who had a productive few months in USL Championship playing for Phoenix. He got his option declined. Now he's playing for Phoenix. Lalas Abubakar's, the obvious big minutes loss there for the team. But if you look at his contract situation, how much he was making, and the amount of kind of defensive mishaps he had this year, it was really time to move on. And I think if anything, if Abubakar were to come back on a friendlier contract, I would absolutely take him because he's a cult hero here in Colorado. I remember when he was loaned to us from Columbus, he was he was very ecstatic about being here. Once the purchase option came through on that, or the trade, whatever compensation we sent to Columbus for that. But in terms of culturally, I think it is Lalas Abubakar. But for me, in terms of, man, if only we had this player to kind of have his third string depth, even in Remy Cabral, I think that's who I would pick.
Yeah. I mean, I felt the same thing. I'm looking through this list and I'm like, there's not many that I lose sleep over, right? There's not somebody who's like, man, that's crazy. I think, it depends on how far you want to stretch this back, but Moist Bombito is probably going to be the guy, right? When you look at the
Yeah.
biggest impact, but he's been gone for a while, so I definitely understand why we're not considering him here. I mentioned Jonathan Lewis, and maybe just and that's more for a meme pick. So there's a big story about how when he was on New York City, we were sitting there watching the game, my brother and I, at the game, and this guy behind us, and New York City had been a team for 2 years now. So this guy behind him is talking to his buddy, his friend, whatever. He's like, yeah, man, diehard New York City fan from day one. Like, this is my team. And he kept calling him Jordan Lewis. Yeah, Jordan, man, he's
Oh,
a baller. Like, he's the best, Jordan Lewis. So anytime he's around, we joke and we're like, yeah, man, like, what's Jordan Lewis up to these days? So we joke about that. But yeah, even he didn't have so much of an impact as anybody. So yeah, I think Bombito and Abubakar are probably your top two. But yeah, there's not ton where you're like, man, if they don't replace him, they're in trouble, which is really good. It's really good going out for
right.
for the future, right? So, and that kind of leads you, and this makes this picture or this question a bit tougher, and that is, with so few people leaving, you're going to have your pretty consistent starting 11, which means you're not going to have a lot of room for breakout players, right? Players who are going to get their first shot, or players who are going to jump in and really impress in their first run out, or what have you. But is there anybody that we should keep an eye on this year as a player to watch for Colorado?
Yeah, I think the big one, I'll say it again because I'm just a huge stan at this point. Cole Bassett at the six should, continue to just, take leaps in his development still, because he's still quite young, and, he came back from Europe kind of a different player. So I hope, with a bit more, focus on the defensive side, he can really stake his claim as one of the best DMs in the league. But beside him, I really do think there is a player in Kamani Stewart Baines. He didn't really get much time on the wing last season, but the few stints that I did see him in, few times he has been playing, he looks productive. It's kind of hard to really make an impact, in the late stages of the game. But if you can start to get some, minutes towards, coming on in, 75th minute, 60th minute, I'd hope to see him kind of have a good progression there. And then finally, like the last kind of dark horse is Alex Harris, who comes from the super draft. When you look at the roster and you don't see that many players in, it's kind of hard to really set Alex Harris expectations up, given he came from a weaker conference and, college play. But overall, I think if there's anyone that could do good, it's Alex Harris. I think I project him to be on the Rapids 2 team, maybe some U.S. Open. Well, no, not even in the U.S. Open Cup, so I can't even see him in that.
Yeah.
But maybe in those, tertiary competitions, wherever you can find minutes for him, I'd like to see his game, but I can't really tell you much about him,
Yeah. Like, and again, that's a tough part. It's like you're grasping at straws at this point, right? So, for me, I'm a member of Chaos Squad, right? So I'm always living in this alternate reality where Zach Steffen shows up and has the lowest PSXG plus minus in the league by a long shot, and Adam Boudry comes in and takes a number one spot in Colorado. Like, hook that to my veins. I'd love that. But since that's probably
I didn't even
not,
think about that.
I know, because Zach Steffen's
I
not
would
going
love that,
anywhere.
honestly.
Yeah, unless you sell him, you got to sell him.
No, he's not.
Yeah.
Well, it's tough because his performance last year was among the worst in team history since PSXG was first being tracked. So it's really hard to kind of, justify his spot, but his salary, it's like you're not going to leave that salary on the bench. And I think ultimately why we haven't seen many players in for the Rapids, I kept hearing whispers throughout the season throughout the offseason that the Rapids were building up their war chest of GAM. And they built it up. We're in a cash for players market now, and one player I think that they should go for that that you're very familiar with is Cameron Harper.
Ah.
I think Harper would go amazing here. I think he'd fit perfectly on this team, but it's hard to do moves when you got Reggie on 700K plus, Stefan 900K plus. Like, it's a lot of salary just being eaten up, which is ultimately, it's tough to navigate in a salary cap league.
That it is. I will say though, I don't think Boudry's going to come and take that number one spot in. So I am going to be watching, and it might be a little bit of a homer pick because we did have him on the podcast, but we're going to be watching Year of Omir Fernandez, right? So in our interview, we dubbed 2025 the Year of Omir. So it is his,
Okay.
He had a breakout season in New York. He was sent to Colorado after that, and he didn't quite get off to the start that he wanted out west, and that's by his own admission. He told us that. He goes, he went over and, he had this really high level that he expected of himself and didn't hit it. Just for whatever reason, he didn't hit it. So he has really high goals this year, and I do think that he's going to take it to the next level and make a name for himself in Colorado, which I'm really, really excited for because I love seeing my guys from New York leave New York and then get better, because that's MLS lore. If it doesn't happen, something's wrong in the world, right?
Yeah, I actually did listen to that podcast, and so I had a good time, kind of getting up to speed with the show and whatnot. And I thought that was a good interview overall. I think Omir is a good pick because when he and Navarro, Navajo, the striker, when they're on the pitch, there's like you ever play Football Manager?
Oh yeah.
So when there's like a green link between two players that are familiar with each other. I think that happens when Omir and Hafa play, because Omir does a lot. I love Omir as the workhorse off the ball winger that's gonna get stuck in and get you some second chances, and he feeds Navarro really well. It's just he really just got to finish chances and be a lot more clinical in front of goal. And I'm gonna take yours because I'm a big Omir fan, so I'll double it up on Omir Fernandez.
Nice, I love it. I love it. We're all here for the Year of Omir. Spread it around. We started that
Nice.
back when he was in New York, so we're trying to get it. We're trying to really get it to take charge here. So the big one, there's not a lot of variation, but there still has to be some lingering question. I want to know what your one question for the year is going to be.
I mean, my question is, can Zach Steffen be a top quality goalkeeper in the league? Because, if you're letting in 9 goals that you shouldn't be letting in, I think the stronger his PSXG, the stronger that kind of stat is, the stronger the Rapids will be. Because, I mean, the Rapids could score goals. The Rapids can stay within games. It's just conceding goals that really kind of, hampers this team. So, what is Zach Steffen's quality going to be in the year 2025 for the Rapids?
I like that. Zach Steffen is, his Leagues Cup performance brought him into the national team, but at the detriment of a lot of players who probably should have been there instead. And listen, he played well when he had his appearance, and he did totally fine, no doubt about it. But I don't think he performed at a level that warranted a national team call up personally. Even in January camp, I don't think he was at that level. So he definitely has a step forward to make. For me, it's around our good old friend Chris. Chris Armis's second year in charge. Very, very rarely is as good as his first. His first year nearly ended in collapse. It saw them fall from a home playoff spot nearly all the way into the play-in game. Are we going to see him take a step forward with this team, or is he going to fall into the same old habit and then take this Colorado team that's got tons of talent and potential around him and ruin it with his, I don't want to say ruin it, but don't let it play up to its potential with the style of play or with the positional, awareness of their players. There's a whole bunch that goes into it. And he needs to, he's got a lot of experience in different areas. So what does he do in year 2 to take that step forward is kind of what I'm looking for.
That's a good question, man.
Yeah.
You having me shake a little bit once you said the second year is not as good. So hoping that's not the case. He is on a 2-year deal. So we'll find out at the end of the year whether or not he remains a Rapids head coach.
Yeah.
That'll be another one to follow.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we've talked players, we've talked questions, we've talked everything about Colorado here. It's time to finish off and put a stamp on it. Predicted finish. Where is Colorado finishing this year?
Oh, man, I want to say 8th.
Okay.
I want to say 8th. I think that's mid, right in the middle. And MLS, you don't have to be the most, dominant team. I mean, the Red Bulls finished with a whole bunch of draws and then catapulted into the final, right? So you just have to be mid. That's really what it comes down to. And if the Rapids are mid-table by the end of the year, I think I'll call that a success because, as you said, with Armis, I'll say with the Rapids, the follow-up year to a playoff year always goes sideways.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can build on, back-to-back, I mean, I know they went from 7th to 8th, but if you can build on back-to-back playoff appearances, maybe get a playoff win under your belt, that's my level. Because if not, it's hard to justify this kind of up and down of the Rapids are good, oh, now they're not, and then the Rapids are good, now they're not. It's something's got to change. Ownership's got to step up for that to happen. But 8th place for me, I think.
I think I'd worry more about conceding less than 4 goals a game in the playoffs before we get to win. That's just me.
Right.
Yeah. Listen, I'm not as sold on Armis as I was in 24. Like when he came in, I was like, great hire. I think that is exactly what he needs to do. Not as sold this year. I don't know why either. Like I got no reason to. It's just doesn't do anything for me, right? However, I do think that what they have going for them is that at the bottom, the West is not as strong as the East. There are a lot more teams in the West that are just like, okay, like you exist, great. So I think that they are still going to be a playoff.
I would
team,
say the Rapids are that team too.
I don't know, man. Like I don't know about that, but I think they're a playoff team, but I don't think that they're a high playoff team. So I've got them between 6 and 9, right? Either just barely missing out on the home games or just barely sneaking into the play-in game. But that's kind of, I have that mid feeling, kind of like you did, kind of just like it's there, right? They exist. They're gonna do their thing. They're gonna be better than some teams. They're gonna be not as good as some teams, and that's kind of just right where they're gonna fall. So that's kind of where I've got. The only benefit that you get out of that is that I am notoriously bad at predictions. So usually, if I predict somebody low, they end up high. So you guys get some of
First
that.
place. Here we come.
Yeah. Listen, we put FC Dallas in second last year. So that tells you how much
I think
we
I
know.
rated Dallas pretty high as well, though, to be honest. So
Yeah. Well, oh man, Juan, this is really,
they
really
shocked
good
a
bit
lot
of
of
fun.
people.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. This is really a good bit of fun. Thank you so much for hopping on. I really want to just give you a minute here, tell people where to find you, where to find your stuff, and all about what you do.
Yeah, so I am running Box State Footy. It's a little media company here covering Colorado soccer. It's mostly Rapids coverage at this point. I'm trying to get more people to help me in, figuring out all the non-league stuff. But we have profiles on some of the teams here. We're going to be doing some U.S. Open Cup. Just because the Rapids aren't a U.S. Open Cup doesn't mean that I won't be there and, supporting the local teams here. So if you're into kind of the niche Colorado soccer world, some of that, you can peer some of that into some of that through Box State Footy. That's at Box State Footy on Twitter. Substack will be linked there, and you can find me at Wanners715 on Twitter, at wanners.bsky.social for the alternate Twitter. But yeah, that's pretty much my plugs. I got a big MLS season of content to bring, so if you want to follow that, it's Wanners on YouTube as well.
There you go. There you go. Well, make sure you go over and give them some love, because that's what we're here to do, right? We're here to share it and build it all up. So if you're new here, if this is your first time seeing us, we are the Designated Players. We do 30 interviews with 30 content creators for every team in MLS leading up to the season. So if you are curious about what the West is going to look like, what some of your Eastern Conference foes are going to look like, or you just want to listen to some other people talk MLS soccer, come follow us. And then once we get into the regular season, it's MLS news reactions. It is MLS history retold. And it's just whatever else we want, because we can. So make sure you give us a follow. We're on all your social podcast platforms, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Blue Sky, all the good stuff. So, make sure you come follow us there too. Juan, this was a ton of fun. Thank you so much for being here. We hope all of our listeners enjoyed this, and we will see you all in the next episode of Not So Deep Dives on the Designated Players and MLS podcast. See ya.